Good afternoon, Scott Campbell, and this is in the series A Christian Pastor in Quebec. The theme I want to talk on today was obviously a very, very important aspect of how we had to interact with French Canadians in Quebec, because most of them had a background in the traditional church. Some had even gone to confirmation and kind of gone through the catechism. They had a sense of respect for the Bible, but at the same time, very few of them had read much of it, and also they had serious questions about its reliability, its trustworthiness. And obviously they're not alone. The English-speaking world too has many of these questions, but some of us, or many of us in the English-speaking world, had greater exposure to teaching on how the Bible was put together, the manuscripts that are available for translation, etc. And the French Quebecers that we met had very little knowledge of these areas. In fact, the average French Quebecer, although from their church background had some respect for the Bible, in their everyday life, they would often use what I call the telephone illustration to talk about how the Bible had been transmitted and how it was probably not very reliable. All of us can remember the telephone game where we're sitting in a room with 15 or 20 people, and a person at a starting point in the circle whispers a message to the person next to them, and then they whisper the message, and that message has to be whispered 10, 15, 20 times depending on the number of people in the room. And by the end, almost all of us can remember the message didn't come through very well. Sometimes it had no relation to the original message. And Quebecers often would bring that type of illustration to me, saying, reading the Bible, how many times has it been translated? How many times? And how has it been transferred from person to person? And needless to say, these are critical questions, right? The Bible is truly our primary source for knowledge about God, knowledge about Jesus Christ, and so many other aspects of the Christian life. And so it's critical that it be reliable, that it be trustworthy. And so it was fascinating to do two things. First and foremost, I would always ask the person challenging the reliability of the Bible, challenging its content, challenging so many things, Marie or Joseph or whoever, have you personally ever read any of the Bible, especially the New Testament, the story of Jesus Christ and what he said, what he did, how he died, how he was raised from the dead? Have you? And invariably the response would be très peu, very little. And so the first thing I would always try to do would be to put New Testament in their hands, get them to say, okay, I'm going to read a chapter a day, and I'm going to look closely at this, and I'm going to look analytically, and I'm going to look with judging and weighing what I'm reading, and I also obviously encourage them to pray and say, God, if this is your book and you're out there, speak to me. Say something to my heart. Speak into my life. Now, I know that that's subjective, but at least they were becoming acquainted with the text. And they would then see the relevance of the text to everyday life. At the same time, I would obviously try to talk to them about the extreme care that first the Jews and then the Christians, the care that they exercised to transfer the biblical text. No, we didn't have photocopiers. No, we didn't have, but there were full-time scribes and copyists for the Jews, and the Christians took great care. And, trying to walk them through what we know about the carefulness of the transcription and the passing manuscripts one to the other. And then, of course, talking some about the number of manuscripts available compared to other works of antiquity, other literature of antiquity. And again, I'm not an expert in any of this, but I was able and have been able to do reading myself and learn a few things that would at least communicate to these people, look, this book just didn't come out of nowhere. There's good basis to say it's reliable, it's trustworthy. You can read it. You can trust that Christ said those words. And then as they began to experience the reality of his words, the power of his words, the wisdom in his words, then of course they would also gain in their confidence that this wasn't a transmission of a telephone message, one person to another in a room. There was much more care. So that was an interesting and continues to be an interesting aspect of exposing people to the reliability, the trustworthiness of God's Word here in French Quebec.